Glamis Castle, located in the heart of the Scottish Highlands, is a majestic fortress that has stood for centuries, boasting a rich history and a reputation for being one of the most haunted castles in Scotland. Its imposing architecture, with its turrets, towers, and grand halls, hides dark secrets and stories of ghostly encounters that have been passed down through generations. One stormy evening in the winter of 1889, a young couple, John and Elizabeth, were invited to stay at Glamis Castle as guests of the Earl of Strathmore, who was known to be a distant relative of the royal family. The couple, intrigued by the castle's mysterious reputation, eagerly accepted the invitation, despite the warnings of the locals about the castle's haunted history. Upon their arrival, John and Elizabeth were greeted warmly by the Earl and his family, who made them feel welcome in the castle's opulent surroundings. However, as the evening progressed, the couple couldn't shake off the feeling of being watched and the strange sensations that seemed to linger in the air. That night, John and Elizabeth retired to their lavish guest room, which was located in one of the castle's oldest wings. As they settled into bed, they heard faint whispers and giggles echoing through the halls outside their room. They dismissed it as the wind playing tricks on them and tried to sleep. But as the night wore on, the disturbances grew more pronounced. They heard footsteps pacing outside their door and the sound of rustling skirts that seemed to come from nowhere. Elizabeth, a practical and level-headed woman, decided to investigate. She ventured into the corridor, armed with a candle, and followed the sounds that led her to a locked door at the end of the hall. She heard sobbing from behind the door and tried to open it, but it was firmly locked. Elizabeth, feeling unnerved, returned to her room and woke John, telling him about her findings. John, an adventurous and curious man, was intrigued. He decided to investigate further and went to find the castle's caretaker, who held the keys to all the rooms. But to their surprise, the caretaker denied the existence of any locked room at that location, insisting that it had been sealed off for centuries and was said to be cursed. Determined to unravel the mystery, John and Elizabeth decided to explore the castle during the day when the atmosphere was less eerie. They spent hours poring over old records, researching the castle's history, and interviewing the staff and locals. What they discovered sent chills down their spines. The locked room had once belonged to Lady Janet Douglas, also known as the Grey Lady, who had been accused of witchcraft and burned at the stake in 1537. It was said that her spirit still haunted the castle, seeking revenge for her unjust execution. Undeterred, John and Elizabeth decided to conduct a séance in the locked room, hoping to communicate with the spirit of Lady Janet Douglas and uncover the truth behind her tragic fate. With the help of a local medium, they gathered in the dimly lit room, lit candles, and chanted incantations. Almost immediately, the room seemed to come alive with supernatural activity. The temperature dropped drastically, and the candles flickered wildly. They heard strange knocking sounds, and the walls seemed to vibrate with an otherworldly energy. Suddenly, a figure appeared before them, clad in a gray gown, her face obscured by a veil. It was the ghost of Lady Janet Douglas, her eyes filled with sorrow and anger. She spoke in a haunting voice, recounting her story of betrayal and persecution, and how she had been wrongly accused of witchcraft and condemned to death. John and Elizabeth listened intently, deeply moved by Lady Janet Douglas's plight. She spoke of her suffering, her innocence, and her longing for justice. Her presence was palpable, and the atmosphere in the room grew heavy with emotion. As Lady Janet Douglas's story unfolded, John and Elizabeth were overcome with a mixture of fear and compassion. They could feel the weight of her anguish and the injustice that had been inflicted upon her. She recounted how she had been betrayed by those she trusted, accused of witchcraft out of jealousy and greed, and sentenced to a horrific death by burning at the stake. Touched by Lady Janet Douglas's plight, John and Elizabeth vowed to help her find peace and seek justice, even in the afterlife. They promised to investigate her case, gather evidence, and clear her name. Lady Janet Douglas's spirit seemed to acknowledge their intentions, and she slowly faded away, leaving the room cloaked in an eerie silence. Determined to keep their promise, John and Elizabeth delved deeper into the history of Glamis Castle, uncovering long-forgotten records and testimonies that shed new light on Lady Janet Douglas's story. They discovered that she had been framed by jealous rivals who coveted her wealth and position. Her accusers had fabricated evidence against her and manipulated the trial, leading to her wrongful conviction. Armed with this new information, John and Elizabeth embarked on a quest for justice, advocating for Lady Janet Douglas's innocence and exoneration. They contacted historians, legal experts, and influential individuals to bring attention to the case. The media picked up the story, and it gained widespread attention across Scotland and beyond. However, their pursuit of justice was not without challenges. They faced resistance from those who wished to keep Lady Janet Douglas's story buried and the castle's dark secrets hidden. They encountered strange occurrences in Glamis Castle, including unexplained noises, cold drafts, and mysterious shadows that seemed to follow them wherever they went. But John and Elizabeth were undeterred. They were determined to see Lady Janet Douglas's story brought to light and her name cleared. Their efforts gained momentum, and eventually, the case was reopened. New evidence was presented, and Lady Janet Douglas was posthumously acquitted, absolving her of the false accusations that had tarnished her legacy for centuries. With Lady Janet Douglas's spirit finally at peace, the strange occurrences in Glamis Castle ceased. John and Elizabeth's investigation and advocacy brought about a new understanding of the castle's history, and it became a prominent landmark for paranormal enthusiasts and history buffs alike. John and Elizabeth left Glamis Castle with a sense of accomplishment and fulfillment, knowing that they had helped right a historical wrong and brought justice to Lady Janet Douglas's memory. Her ghost was never seen again, but it was said that her spirit had found peace, finally able to rest after centuries of unrest. To this day, Glamis Castle remains a popular tourist attraction, with visitors sharing stories of Lady Janet Douglas's ghost and her tragic tale. Some claim to have encountered her spirit, still veiled in gray, wandering the halls of the castle, while others feel a lingering presence of sorrow and injustice in certain rooms. The story of Lady Janet Douglas's ghost in Glamis Castle has become a legend, a testament to the castle's haunted reputation and the power of perseverance in seeking justice, even in the face of supernatural phenomena. It serves as a reminder that history holds secrets, and sometimes it takes brave souls like John and Elizabeth to bring them to light and give voice to those who have been silenced by time. As the news of Lady Janet Douglas's posthumous acquittal spread, it gained international attention. Historians and paranormal enthusiasts flocked to Glamis Castle, eager to learn more about the ghostly presence that had haunted its halls for centuries. Many visitors claimed to have encountered Lady Janet Douglas's spirit, describing eerie experiences such as hearing disembodied voices, feeling sudden drops in temperature, and witnessing objects move on their own. John and Elizabeth, now known as champions of Lady Janet Douglas's story, were invited to give lectures and interviews, sharing their findings and experiences. They continued their research, uncovering more details about Lady Janet Douglas's life and the events that led to her wrongful conviction. They discovered that her accusers had been members of a rival clan who had conspired to seize her lands and wealth. Lady Janet Douglas had been a victim of political intrigue and betrayal, and her tragic fate had been a dark stain on Glamis Castle's history. The authorities, inspired by John and Elizabeth's efforts, conducted a formal inquiry into Lady Janet Douglas's case. The evidence collected by John and Elizabeth, combined with new historical findings, revealed the truth behind her wrongful conviction. The authorities officially exonerated Lady Janet Douglas, clearing her name and restoring her place in history as an innocent victim of a conspiracy. With justice finally served, The ghostly sightings in Glamis Castle became less frequent, and the castle's atmosphere seemed to lighten. John and Elizabeth were hailed as heroes, and their work was recognized for its significant contribution to uncovering the truth about Lady Janet Douglas's ghost and the history of Glamis Castle. In recognition of their efforts, John and Elizabeth were granted permission to spend a night in the very room where Lady Janet Douglas's ghost had appeared to them. They decided to stay on the anniversary of Lady Janet Douglas's wrongful execution, hoping to communicate with her spirit one last time and bid her farewell. As the clock struck midnight, John and Elizabeth sat in the dimly lit room, waiting in anticipation. The air grew colder, and they felt a familiar presence. Suddenly, Lady Janet Douglas's ghost materialized before them, wearing the same gray gown as before. However, this time, she appeared serene and radiant. Lady Janet Douglas expressed her gratitude to John and Elizabeth for their unwavering dedication in seeking justice for her. She spoke of how their efforts had helped her find peace and closure, allowing her spirit to move on from the castle. She thanked them for restoring her reputation and vindicating her memory. Overcome with emotion, John and Elizabeth bid farewell to Lady Janet Douglas's ghost. She smiled at them, her ethereal form fading away slowly until she vanished completely. The room seemed to brighten, and a sense of serenity enveloped them. In the years that followed, Lady Janet Douglas's story became a legend that continued to be told in Glamis Castle and beyond. Her ghost was never seen again, and the castle's reputation as one of Scotland's most haunted places gradually faded. John and Elizabeth went on to write a book about their experiences, sharing the truth about Lady Janet Douglas's story and the mysteries of Glamis Castle with the world. As they reflected on their journey, John and Elizabeth realized that their encounter with Lady Janet Douglas's ghost had been a turning point in their lives. It had ignited their passion for history, justice, and the paranormal, and they continued to pursue these interests in their future endeavors. They were grateful for the opportunity to have made a difference in Lady Janet Douglas's story and to have helped her find peace in the afterlife. Today, Glamis Castle stands as a historical landmark, with visitors from all over the world coming to admire its grandeur and learn about its rich history.